Hi everyone, my presentation today is about a reading whose title is From Damsels in Distress to Sexy Superheroes. This reading focuses on sexism in video games. There are four keywords in this article: gender, video games, ambivalent sexism, and sex role attitudes. The next is about the portrayal of women in the media. In the 1970s, gender role stereotypes were common in the media, with women more likely to be portrayed within the family and men more likely to be portrayed outside the family. Women were often portrayed in demeaning stereotypical roles, such as being dependent on men, performing demeaning domestic tasks, being submissive and unintelligent. In addition, research on the portrayal of women in the media has found that women are often portrayed as sexual playthings or sometimes aggressors or victims. Well, this slide is about the portrayal of women in video games. The gender stereotypes typical of early video game studies point to the need for female characters to be rescued, their weakness and helplessness waiting to be rescued by the heroes or the direct motivation for the crude insertion into the narrative of the game, and the product of a game design from the outside with the sole intention of benchmarking the fantasy of male heroism. The most direct example of this is Princess Bridget in the early Super Mario Bros. Series. The hero saves the day storyline is played out over and over again in the series, with Princess Bridget's freedom and belonging in the hands of a male character whose sole purpose in existence is to make the male character a hero. However, recent games show an increasing number of female characters being portrayed as sexual objects, and female characters are more likely to wear more revealing clothing. Not only are they sexy, but they are also aggressive. The next is about ambivalent sexism. Sexism is often defined as attitudes or behaviors based on traditional gender role stereotypes. And ambivalent sexism is divided into benevolent sexism and hostile sexism. The difference is that benevolent sexism endorses more traditional attitudes towards women, while hostile sexism endorses attitudes and behaviors that treat women as sex objects by presenting them with derogatory characteristics. Hostile sexism, on the other hand, seeks to justify masculinity through the objectification of women. It also views women as power seekers and uses their sexuality to gain advantage. Benevolent sexism is seen as a more positive form of sexism that encourages male power through the attribution of traditional gender roles and men's need to protect women. This slide is about a shift in the portrayal of female characters in video games. Over the past 2 decades, there has been a shift in the portrayal of female characters in video games. Away from female princesses who need to be rescued, now they are often sexualized and dressed in revealing clothes. In more modern games, women are usually the heroes of the game. They're sexy and are often portrayed as sexual objects. And the graph below shows how female video game characters have become increasingly sexy over time. In short, the portrayal of female characters in video game has shifted from benevolent to hostile sexism. This shift in sexism may influence attitudes and thus have very real consequences outside the realm of gaming. Next, it was the turn of case study, a game called Horizon Zero Dawn. Let's start with a video. Well, this is a third-person action game about mythical dinosaurs, cavemen, and the apocalypse, set in a distant future where humanization has ended. Damaged planets are being rebuilt. Humans are now the best species, and highly advanced, intelligent, mechanical beasts sit at the top of the food chain. Players take on the role of Aloy, a young man abandoned by his tribe, who sets out on the adventure to solve some of the mysteries surrounding her. Horizon Zero Dawn is a positive example of the portrayal of female characters. In this half-civic, half-primitive world, the heroine, Aloy, has her own way of surviving as a hunter, and after being banished from her tribe, bravely sets out on a journey without the slightest hesitation, and her bravery in such a harsh and primitive environment, hunting, responding to the enemy, and even fighting to stop the impending catastrophe, is a brave and courageous image, to say the least. Even with a supporting cast, Ally doesn't miss a beat. She knows when to bite her tongue and when to hit back at NPCs, and she's spunky and daring enough to stand up for herself and others without ever resorting to meanness or cruelty. The game portrays women as brave and robust, intelligent and calm, even a little mischievous and sassy, rather than as pawns, victims, and objects of male desire. In conclusion, I think what the author is trying to convey is that video games and feminism are not supposed to be in opposition to each other. The male-centric landscape of the video game industry is being reshaped by the growing number of female gamers. The mainstream gaming market is concerned with the needs of the female demographic and is intentionally improving the portrayal and storytelling of female characters at the production level to make them more in line with the values of the majority of the population. Rather than focusing solely on the male perspective, the number of female characters is increasing, presenting a more diverse and three-dimensional characterization. More and more female characters in video games are becoming narrative subjects, which helps to break the male monopoly on the gaze relationship and changes the power position of the viewing object. But on the other hand, a few video game producers still cling to old ideas, either overwhelmed by the internet or believing that games are exclusively for men and that female characters should carry the stereotype of a medium with erotic overtones. They do not create character for the sake of the game, but for the sake of creating a sexy toy attached to a male character. This is my reference list. And thanks for your listening.